Mike Herbst. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick. Looking forward to it.
For sure, man. I appreciate you being open to do this. You and I feel like I've been friends for probably like 9-10 years now, right?
I think so. I mean, at least since I think even when I was going to Marquette, I feel like we definitely went to some music festivals when you came up to visit our mutual friend, Will Brady. So at least 10 years at this point, which is kind of hard to believe.
Yeah, it is kind of wild how things start to go faster. Like the years just gets quicker, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But no, it's been great that we've kept in touch all these years and that you've found your way to Chicago too.
Yeah, it's cool. I was here, then I left, and I loved it so much that I came back. It's just an amazing city.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's been hard for me to figure out like any other place that I'd want to live. So it's been nice that so many folks that have moved here as well.
Yeah. So this is a podcast about motivation, work ethic, personal development. I feel like whenever I talk to you, I'm like, hey, what are you reading? Like, what podcasts are you liking? Because I sense that you're someone that likes to just always learn, and that's awesome. So just really honored that you're coming on and willing to tell me more about that stuff. And if I have a following or listeners, this is a good guy to hear from. So,
oh, thanks. I really appreciate that. That's a compliment that I take very earnestly. So thanks.
Thanks. Right on, dude. Glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So let's just basics. You're someone that works in like agency PR still, or are you not in that area anymore?
Yeah. So I work at a PR agency now. Like a lot of people in PR, we kind of bounce around jobs quite a bit. So I started my career working at an agency. So I guess backing up further, I was a public relations major in college. Journalism was something that I like ever since I was a little kid. I always really wanted to get into. And when I was in college, which would be, 08 to 2012, that was when the journalism industry really, especially print, really started to get hit pretty hard. So it didn't seem like the best career path at that point. So for a lot of folks, even current journalists now, PR is kind of like the closest approximation. And there's a lot of similar skills that get utilized being in PR in terms of your ability to be a good storyteller. I think continuous learning and just interest in current events is something that's, just critical in PR and just, loving to write and to read.
Yeah.
Is also just really important. So for me, I mean, those are all things that I'm really passionate about. And it's a really good mix for me. I think I've found something that's just a great fit for me. I love the strategic aspect of it too. Working at a PR agency, we help our clients work through some pretty tricky situations. A lot of, gaming out strategies of what's going to happen when we release news or how we work, through anything. My specialization is more in corporate communications. So we're the ones that get to deal with all the issues and crises and, but like I said, I love the challenge, and I think we really do help a lot of our clients, with meaningful work. There are definitely other aspects of PR that, I've worked on over the years that I don't think are as meaningful and can be a bit fluffy. And you're kind of like, why are we doing this? But for me, I think I found a good spot. So yeah, right now I work at an agency here in Chicago. They've got other offices here in the US and around the world. So it's been a great experience so far, and I've really enjoyed it. Definitely, no two days are the same, and it really pushes you in a lot of ways, good and bad sometimes. But definitely been a rewarding career so far.
One of the worlds I got into for a while was I was selling to agencies, specifically social media agencies. And that was 2015 when people were trying to figure out how to leverage, how to listen, how to monitor, basically how to make the most out of social media. And I think that technology rapidly changing, everyone's kind of has to continue to, like you said, no day is the same, kind of reinvent that wheel or at least stay on the edge of innovation. But I remember I went to an event just for corporate communications once, and I realized that PR, corporate communications, is a totally different world. Not different, but it's a specific niche outside of marketing, right? Like communications as a thing. How do you make the company look specifically in a certain way, or what's our stance as a corporation? Is so different than how we're going to market these products or increase the revenue, bottom line, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's great that you have a clear understanding of that. Sometimes it's really funny. I feel like my parents don't even know what I do, even though I've told them for like 10 years. They have a hard time, or even, if somebody asks me like, oh, what do you do on a daily basis? And I think that's a really good way of kind of drawing a distinction between corporate communications and more traditional means of like, marketing and brand communications. I mean, our jobs too, we work very closely with like people in internal communications and employee engagement. Over the course of my career, everything has become a lot more integrated so that all these teams work together, even digital, so that we're communicating in a really consistent way across all the different channels we have to make sure that we're talking to all the people the same way and giving them the right messages. So there's, you definitely get exposure to a wide range of things. There's investor relations. It's like, it's kind of like a black hole that you might not even realize exists of comms.
Sure. I mean, I think of, not to get political at all, but like, I think of sustainability or, this idea of equality or equity, right? Like there's so many things that corporations or even just small businesses are required to take a stance on now. And I wonder, when you said at the beginning, sometimes it can be tricky, right? Like, how do you possibly have a stance that you might not even care about offending people, but that fits all the boxes that you have to while retaining the brand or the company's image, right? I guess that's a broad question, but I'm curious kind of how you tiptoe around that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's become so important nowadays. I think people really look to the brands that they engage with and the companies that they work with to align with their values, and companies too want to make sure that they're positioning themselves in a way that matches their own employees' values. And that's just something that has continued to grow over time. People really want to make sure that they're working for a company that's standing up for the right things, and it's aligned with, I shouldn't necessarily like their personal views, but they feel like they're out there supporting the right causes and doing the right things. So like you said, it's very much a balance. I mean, especially over the past 2 to 3 years with the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement, now so many companies pulling out of Russia. It's really been an unprecedented time in our career, or in my career, I should say. And I think a lot of other people's careers in PR who have been in this a lot longer than I have, just all these really difficult issues that we've had to navigate. And like you said, making sure that we're delivering a stance that's authentic. I think authenticity is the number one thing, because people really see through fluffy corporate BS nowadays. And they, with social media, with, corporate newsrooms on the internet, people can very easily go back and check and say like, hey, you said this a couple of years ago, you're going to commit to, especially a lot of the DEI commitments that were made in the wake of George Floyd's murder and the Black Lives Matter movement really taking off here. People are starting to go back and saying like, hey, like you made these commitments a couple of years ago, like, have you made progress on that? So, it's really us just helping coach our clients and the organizations we work with to make sure that they're keeping themselves accountable too. But I think authenticity is just a huge part of that. And to your point too, sustainability and ESG are becoming huge issues now too. People really want to make sure that the companies that they're working with are committing to, making the earth a better place and helping fight climate change. I mean, it's really crazy, even within professional service. Like some companies are even including that in like RFPs. They want to see like your sustainability report. So it's really, people are being held accountable. And I think, a lot of people realize it's a new reality. So I think it's just making sure that we share the reputational risks with folks and let them know, like, if you don't do this the right way, it can really backfire.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the Russia thing, but I mean, there was a list I saw of the companies that were still operating in Russia, like a day after the war broke out.
Yeah.
Right. And what it shows is just the general public's, or at least what seems to be its perception of the public that demands certain values on the brands that they use. Right. Like one was Subway, one was Nestle. And I think even back like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, people have really strong opinions on Chick-fil-A based on some of their more traditional religious values. Not even what they say they stand for, but what they think Chick-fil-A doesn't stand for. And I find it hard, again, like that idea of how do you be authentic when you are authentic and it's still not good enough for everybody to kind of toe that line, because you're never going to appease everyone if you're a business, or honestly, if you take a stance on anything,
Yeah, well, I think what's something that we have to coach our clients through too is, making sure that we're responding in a proper manner, and like, you're not just focused on like a really kind of the loudest voices that represent kind of that might not represent most people, because every day you're seeing stuff posted on their social media accounts that can either be really negative, and it's like, is this actually representative of what most people think? And I think what's really been interesting with Chick-fil-A, for example, is how they've really pivoted at coming out of that to appeal to a much broader subset of people. And I think, it's amazing. I live on the north side of Chicago, which is a very liberal place. And there's a Chick-fil-A that's about a mile away from me. And you go there on the weekend and there are cars wrapped around the parking lot waiting in the drive-through. I think, it's interesting. And I think the types of products you have too, it's like, I think people hold different types of companies to different accords based on, what industries they're into.
Sure. And this is where like PR marketing are similar. But when I think of Nike, I think of sports and excellence or winning.
Yeah.
When I think of Chick-fil-A, I think of that delicious like first bite of the sandwich or the nugget. Like their food is just so good.
Yeah.
When I think of, Nestle, I think of big corporations. I think of water. I think of like harming the environment.
Right.
And it's funny how these specific brands turn into like meaning in our head. And someone else might have a different view on Nestle and a totally different view on Nike, right? But like that's my personal point of view. And like you said, like I might represent a subset of the world that isn't representative of everyone else, right? But just love what you said about you almost have to like coach your clients on this is maybe one loud tweet that might be top of mind in this hour, but it might not be tomorrow, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the news cycle moves very quickly these days. There are a lot of people on social media who are really just trying to out there just trying to make a lot of noise. And I would say they're activists for the wrong reasons, So I think it's just recognizing when you have a genuine issue on your hands. And you also just don't want to be, there's been a lot of media coverage too of like, I think in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement in particular, there were like, I think like, some of the stuff can come across as really like insensitive or just bizarre, if it's not, if you're a company. I think Skittles, for example, had like kind of like a really strange tweet about this, and people were wondering, they're like, do we really need to hear from Skittles about their thoughts on like racial equality, so sometimes it's not the best fit for every company to go out there and make a stance. I think if you're a massive, like, if you're like a Fortune 500 company, if you're something that's a bigger part of like societal fabric, I think absolutely. Or like your employee base is really diverse. That's something that's really important to them. But, you don't just want to be adding the conversation just to add to the conversation or because other brands are saying something, because then again, that's when people, I think that's where they see through a lot of that. And that can be even, create an even larger problem.
Yeah.
Is kind of like the fake, the fake sincerity.
Yeah, I will tell you, I had a bag of gray Skittles once, and I found it to be just weird. Doesn't really like connote like ideas of like, oh, that's fruity and delicious and sweet. It was more like, why am I eating a gray Skittle?
Yeah.
Because they had some sort of a notion on Pride Month about colors and stuff, and like it's just a really kind of it's a stretch. Come on, Skittles.
It can be. So, I think it's great that a lot of these companies are, and a lot of them do kind of. The important thing too is like if Skittles is going to do that, what else are they doing? Because that can be very performative, right? It's like, what are you doing with your CSR efforts? Are you making donations to organizations that are advancing, LGBTQ rights? Do you have internal support for your employees? What are you doing to help make it a better, safer workplace for them? So there's a lot more that goes into this. You can't just be out there saying this and then not have the bona fides to back it up. Because otherwise it just looks like you're trying to capitalize on, they call it like cause marketing is something that is kind of coming to the fray a bit more. But it's a delicate dance, long story short.
That's definitely it. It's like, are you walking the walk or just talking?
Yeah.
I think for companies nowadays with social media, it's so easy to just talk and perform what is hot. So, man, it's been wild what's happened the last couple of years and just how sensitive and how much weight is on the look and the stance of the business values. I just wonder back in the 60s, with all the big oil and even like with cigarettes, if people held those kinds of things to such high standards as they do nowadays for almost every brand, but that's more of just a curiosity of mine.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not like an advertising historian, but just from, what I know about that, I think a lot of it was more of like status symbols, and you were looking to attain a certain lifestyle. You really wanted to be associated for a certain thing based on, how it made you feel or the image you were looking to connote. So I think it was a bit more superfluous back then, and I think people just weren't as, we just got a lot more information on our hands these days too. I think it's a lot easier to kind of look behind the curtain and see, what companies are up to, or there's a lot more news nowadays. So you might be hearing a little bit more about corporate impropriety than maybe people did back in, up through the 90s. And I think it's a good thing though that we are holding a lot of these companies to a bit of a stricter accord. Just knowing that the massive influence that they have on our lives these days and on society, I don't think it's I don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah, there's so much conglomeration of the companies that buy bigger ones, or if you look at snack food, for instance, or any kind of drink, any kind of processed food, they kind of go back to the same parent companies, and a lot of those parent companies have the same board members, the same investors. It's just wild when you look deep into that. But I want to talk about Chicago and soccer and baseball and everything. But I think the next topic I want to cover is just like learning and reading. Like here we are talking about concepts that exist in the news we're talking about information and information gathering, signals we pick up. I'll tell you my point of view. I do my best to read one or two different news articles from different, I guess, news sources. I like the Wall Street Journal, but recognize there's more of a conservative bias there. I like PBS a lot, the News Hour, but I recognize even PBS is slightly more liberal nowadays. BBC and then other like international news. I do my best to stay on that. But yeah, CNN, Fox, I try to stay away from the really scandalous cable news. So it's not really even so much about which news do you like, but what's your point of view on gathering information? I can go straight into podcasts and YouTube, but even YouTube, the podcasts on there, those are directly targeted to me. So it's going to, I don't get the full view based on the curation that Google's algorithm does for that. So if you could just create, or just like say one or two basic concepts of how you think about how are you going to spend this hour gathering information?
Yeah. I mean, this is literally something I have to do. This is a critical part of my job. So the amount of newsletters and news websites and podcasts and all sorts of other things that I consume on a daily basis is quite frankly a bit embarrassing and then sometimes a little bit overwhelming, but that's what we have to do in order to kind of keep up to date and be the best, media experts for our clients. But I really think that you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of what you're outlining. One thing I always tell people if they ever ask me about this is that you want to seek out sources that are going to inform your views. They're not going to affirm your views, because cable news, that is what it does, right? It tells you what you want to hear. A lot of it is designed to get you really amped up, no matter what the network is, because they want you to stay watching for longer and longer and longer. I think one good example of this is now CNN. They have the breaking news tag on the bottom of the screen at all hours of the day, even if it's not necessary. Before, breaking news used to mean a disaster is happening, right? Or a major news event is happening right now. We're covering it live. But that's not what it is anymore. It's breaking news might be something a politician said, and we're going to report on it for the rest of the day. So a lot of the broadcast news is really designed to hook you just to watch and cause controversy, and kind of just keep you coming back, kind of getting those dopamine receptors firing. I don't really view it any differently than social media at this point. News Hour is great. BBC World News, awesome. I think especially during the Ukraine-Russia war, they've been probably the source that I've been watching the most. 60 Minutes is awesome. I think,
hell yeah.
I think
60 Minutes is great journalism.
Yeah, I think like long form journalism where you're really diving into a topic and you're letting the experts talk and like you're really learning a lot more about it, I think is something that's a lot more appealing to me. But yeah, I think like Wall Street Journal, I think the editorial side of the paper has actually gotten quite a bit better and more down the middle in recent years. The editorial, or excuse me, the news side has gotten very much more down the middle in recent years. Obviously, the editorial side and opinion pages skews quite a bit more conservative. But yeah, I think just really trying to consume your news from a really diverse set of outlets. One thing I really like to do too is there are a lot of like think tanks that are awesome for if you're really looking to go deep on something and like really nerd out, like Brookings, CSIS. There's the Council on Foreign Relations, like right now for anything regarding Russia and Ukraine. It's invaluable. You're listening to like the smartest people in these fields. And this is who a lot of journalists are going to be talking to write these stories. So you're kind of cutting out the middleman in that way too. You can kind of form your own opinions. So a lot of those outlets have tons of awesome podcasts that like during COVID, I found incredibly helpful and were much a little bit ahead of the news cycle in that regard. And I think like just subscribing to newsletters, just a wide range of newsletters from like some of your favorite outlets and some of your favorite topics is a way to kind of help cut down on some of the time. So the stuff is getting served to you. And it just makes it a lot easier to digest. And, if you want to go deep on something, you can. If not, you've at least scanned a little bit and you got a good sense of it. But yeah, I think that's the number one thing. It's if something's making you feel like really emotional or riled up or angry, or people are being really dramatic, or if there's, if you're seeing like politicians being interviewed for stuff, like that's usually a red flag to me. You're not going to be getting the straight story. So I think that's my tip. I think, like I said, just seek out things that are going to inform your views instead of affirming them.
When it comes to those think tanks, you're the first person I've heard mention that. I had heard of the Brookings Institute, right? I've heard of Council on Foreign Relations. How are those organizations funded? Like, what is their motivation? Or is it just fundamentally whatever the truth is? Like, and how do they stay honest?
Well, and that's where you have to be careful too, because some of the think tanks can be very partisan. The ones that I've named are the ones in my experience that seem to have the least partisan slant, and I think are most they're most similar to like the AP, right? Where like to me, like news should be kind of boring, it should be just the straight facts. I want to hear from the smartest experts on a certain topic, and just kind of based on my experience in listening and consuming some of the content, and a lot of these are starting to kind of function almost, I don't want to say as news organizations themselves, but they're doing a really good job of making their content really engaging and digestible. Because when you first hear like, oh, like I'm going to read some reports in the Brookings Institute, you're like, oh, that's like, are these like 50-page PDFs? But they've got some really great podcasts that are, 20 minutes, 30 minutes long, and you can get caught up to speed on things pretty quickly. Yes. So I think the other thing is like they've got typically a lot of policy experts, people who have just been working in the field most recently, so they've got like the most firsthand knowledge on these things. And yeah, but that is a really good point though, Nick, is you have to be very careful which think tanks you start looking into.
Sure. Talking about 60 minutes in the long form journalism, it's funny that we think of 12 minutes as long form now, right?
Yeah.
But that's why I like podcasts so much. I'm not the only one that likes podcasts for that reason, but when Rogan goes deep into a subject with a specific expert in an area, I think it doesn't have to be boring at all. It can be extremely interesting because this person is the foremost, expert in that specific niche.
Yeah.
And when I think about podcasts, that's the same thing. Any kind of podcast, talking to some, I think we talked about like it's American history or something. There's some sort of a podcast where they take a subject and they go deep into it. Right. I think that's the thing about our generation as millennials and even everyone after us, that we've kind of lost that muscle of sitting down with something and saying, I'm going to finish this 50-page PDF, right? Like I'm not good at that. I'm not even good at reading anymore. I wish I was better at reading. I'm much more of an auditory learner, which is why I'm kind of constantly consuming podcasts and things like that. But I don't really have a point there. More just long form podcasts anything that allows you to go deep on a subject. I think if you sit with it for a second and you really get into it, you'll get in the flow, and it does become really interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I think finding formats that work best for you, because I'm very much with you. Like, for someone who works in communications, like, I do not read books or anything nearly as much as I used to, because I spend so much of my day reading and writing that it's just not. It's like the last thing I want to do when I sign off for the day. So
Yeah.
podcasts, audiobooks, YouTube channels of news organizations. Like, if you're looking just for like a webinar, if you just need something to look at, you know, when you're doing this, I think that's great. But yeah, I think it's just finding, we live in such an amazing time where there's so much access to information, and there's a lot of really high quality multimedia journalism that you can seek out. So I think it's just not being afraid to dive in and just really just trying to push yourself. One of my favorite podcasts, it's called Intelligence Squared, and it's a debate. So they have like a motion. One idea could be like universal basic income is bad. Basically, it's usually something more eloquent than that. But they've got two, like we were saying, they've got 4 experts on the subject, 2 for each side, and they argue back and forth. But it's very respectful. Both teams have 5 minutes of time where they can make their point. And they really push the audience. They poll the audience beforehand, and you can do this at home too, of like where you stand on the issue. And then after the debate is concluded, they poll the audience, and then whoever has moved the audience the most, one direction or another, is deemed the winner. And I think that's just a great way to really kind of challenge yourself, while still, learning quite a bit. And I really wish there was more of that, where there's like, because I think that's why we like probably 60 Minutes so much, is people are very respectful to each other. They're allowed to sit down, make their point. And I think that's something that can be kind of very much lost on, either cable news or even within news articles. You're getting really brief snippets and not, kind of getting the full story.
Yeah. Bringing it to this podcast, it's one thing that I found challenging is getting deep enough on a subject where I can allow you to bloom and let Herbst tell me exactly what he thinks and how he thinks about it, but also getting into all the subjects I want to cover while keeping it digestible, right? Because no one is going to sit here for 3 hours and listen, but they just might for 35 or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is why I kind of do the best I can to toe both lines around brevity, but also deep enough. I'll ask 2 or 3 questions about PR, 2 or 3 questions about news source and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think it's the perfect amount. Like you said, nobody really, I just know me, if I see a podcast is like over an hour, I know I'm a lot less likely to listen to it. So like you said, kind of, I think 30 to 45 minutes is definitely the sweet spot. And I think a lot of news organizations are finding that out, or not news organizations, but a lot of these, kind of think tanks and log form interviews. I think that's, it's really accessible, because then you can listen to it in like 1, maybe 2 sittings, and it's not something that's going to be sitting in your queue for a while. But yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah. I always like that 45-minute kind of like time period. And that's why probably cable shows are that amount, or at least just under an hour. And then even in college, like the discussion section was 45 minutes. The lectures that were 75 or 90 were just like, oh, this is so long.
Your brain only has like so much capacity.
Yeah.
I know there's like some scientific research around this, and I think 20 to 25 minutes is kind of where you can start to lose people. So, yeah, I think 45 is typically like the max, but so that's good.
I started this podcast thinking about motivation and how to the classic productivity hackers on YouTube. I was really into that. And a lot of them recommend that 20, 25 minutes, get up, do something else, do something mindful, cook, take a walk, meditate, draw or something. This is during COVID when people were just like losing their minds. And since then I've gone away from that. Like, let's not try to be productive every minute of the day. Right. But what you said about that 20, 25 minutes, I've always found that I work super good in spurts. If I can be productive for 20, 25 minutes, take a 10-minute break, come back to it, do the same thing. That is what works for me, as opposed to trying to sit down at a desk and just sit there for 4 hours straight, have lunch and then sit there for 4 hours straight again. Right.
Yeah. I mean, your body just can't. I've struggled with that too during the pandemic. I'm very much an office creature, and I just love being able to like get up and just go say hello to my coworker. If I have a
Yeah.
question about something, I'd rather maybe just go talk to them in person for a couple seconds and then shooting an email, just because it just, I don't know, kind of gets you up, it gets you moving. You get away from your computer, because otherwise you just turn into like, you just can kind of, just feel very blah. I mean,
Yeah.
what is nice at home? I mean, I've got like my acoustic guitar over there, and if I really need to take a break, I'll just play for 5 to 10 minutes, and it's just something that is, I'm engaging a totally different part of my brain. And when I come back, it's like, okay, I feel a little bit refreshed and kind of ready to maybe think about something in a different way. So I agree with that approach. I think it'd be critical.
That's exactly it. Like guitar, right? You're using your motor function skills instead of just kind of Job of the Hut in your chair. So
yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So you grew up in the south side of Chicago and a suburb, right?
Yeah, so I'm from Hickory Hills, which is it's literally like a square mile. There are a bunch of other very small suburbs around it. It's really not too far outside the city. It's basically straight southwest of the Loop. I would say about 20 to 25 minutes on a good day. It's pretty close to Midway Airport. And I grew up there. Went to school in Milwaukee, moved back home for a couple of years, and then have been on the north side of Chicago since then.
So you're a Sox fan through and through?
Oh yeah. Very proud Sox fan. I think one thing, if you ever meet people from the South Side, they're very proud of where they come from, and I think the Sox are a perfect representation of that. I love, when you go to the game, you see so much of like the South Side gear, and like I said, I think people are just really, really proud of where they come from. A lot of folks are, obviously, it's a bit more of a middle class and working class side of town, even the suburbs down that way. So people are, they have to work really hard for what they have. And typically they've grown up in that part of the city as well. So there's a lot of deep connections. There's a lot of family. I mean, that's kind of how I feel in my case as well. So always happy to go back home and love being able to go to Sox games too.
Yeah. I went to a Sox game for the first time last summer, and I had a blast. I thought that's
great.
I mean, then I went back 2 or 3 times with different groups and sat in the bleachers twice out of the 3 times. And man, like it's not that Wrigley isn't amazing in its own way, but I think that people that sleep on the Sox just because the Cubs are at least they were the cool team to like. Last year they're just so horrible and the Sox were so good. They're losing out because down there, guaranteed rate field, it's an awesome time.
It really is. I tell people, it's a good place to see a game. It's not Wrigley Field, it's not Fenway, but it's a great place to catch a game. The food is good, a lot of great beer, and I think the fans are what really makes it. There aren't a lot of Sox fans. They don't have a really strong history of winning, so the people that are fans are super passionate about the team. Mm-hmm. They're super knowledgeable. They're very loyal, and when the Sox are actually good for the first time in a while, I mean, the energy in there is really awesome. I was able to go to my first playoff game this last October when they were playing the Astros in the first round. It was just awesome, So it's like you said, definitely don't sleep on it. It's a great experience. The neighborhood too there's some really pretty good bars and restaurants around there, and it's starting to grow a little bit. Bridgeport's starting to become like a bit more of a popular place for folks to move to. So I know some people might have some misconceptions or reservations about going down there, but it's a great place to see a game. Love to have anyone join us on the South Side.
That's exactly what it was. Is because I went after my first game, I went to a Cubs game, and I looked around and I realized so many people were driving in from the suburbs, or they were like, people were just kind of there for the party. And not that people aren't there at the Sox to have a beer, but like there's just a different vibe in general. And it might just be a function of me not going to, 2016 of the playoffs. That's a different at Wrigley Field. That's a different vibe. Right. But I noticed that it was like Southside pride, right? Like we were at Turtles before talking about the bars and restaurants. It's just different down there than walking up and down Clark Street, which is now basically a big hotel.
It's crazy what's happened to Wrigleyville, and I feel bad for I know Cub fans, and I was telling them like it's really a shame what's happened to I mean, we're not crying that like the Taco Bell and McDonald's got knocked down, but like there were some classic bars around there, and I feel like it's very much lost a bit of its neighborhood feel. It's starting to feel a bit like Rosemont or something, and it's kind of a shame. And I think the ballpark too is starting to been overshadowed by some of those really tall buildings. Before you would see Wrigley Field when you were walking down Addison, and now you don't really see it until you're like at the corner of Clark and Addison. But yeah, no, I think Sox fans, it's never really been cool to be a Sox fan. So people are just really proud of the team and proud to show off the neighborhoods and where they're from. A lot of folks grow up there and stay there and raise their families there. So people have really deep ties and are just really passionate about, the neighborhoods they're from. So, and they're friendly people too, very down to earth. You've got, like I said, it's definitely a different vibe than the north side. No pretension, which is also a bit refreshing. But yeah, definitely go down there. Hopefully we have a good team to root for again this year.
That's kind of what I meant and what I mentioned is like it's real. Whereas the north side, you just get more of the franchises and stuff like that. But when it comes to soccer, I know that you're big into, is it the English Premier League or what do you like generally?
I mean, all types of soccer. I grew up playing soccer. It was always my favorite sport as a kid. Played in high school. Could have played in college if I wanted to play D3, but Marquette was too good of a school to turn down. So I had to put my soccer. That was where my competitive soccer career got put on hold. But I still continue to play. I play with a lot of guys that I played, intramurals with. We play every Sunday round, year round. We'll do indoor when they put an inflatable dome up, and we'll be out there on Sunday nights, during the summertime too. But I love it. The Premier League is probably my favorite league, but I'm a huge Chicago Fire fan too. Like they are my soccer team. The Premier League I watch really closely, but I still haven't like adopted a team. There's definitely teams I root for and teams that I root against, but it's just, and I think this ties into being a Sox fan, and like the teams I like are very much a representation of like where I'm from. Like the U.S. men's national team is also, I would say one of my favorite sports teams, period. And to me, it's like, you're so proud to be from there. So I always kind of felt like I'd be encroaching a little bit on, knowing these clubs have such tight identities with the communities that they're based in. And that's what makes it so fun to watch, is the passion of these English fans. They're representing, I think London has like 10 clubs, so every little neighborhood has their own club and the passion that comes along with that. But I still haven't been able to like kind of force myself to adopt a team. I typically root for the teams that have any of the Americans. Right now we have an American coach. That's the coach of Leeds, which is really exciting. So definitely rooting for them to do well. But I think part of it too, it's like, it's just such a perfect weekend morning activity. I think that's part of the reason why it's gotten pretty popular in the United States is you wake up, and when you're either hungover or just chilling out on a Saturday or Sunday morning, you've got soccer to watch. And but I'd say the Premier League and the German League are my two favorite leagues to watch. They're the most entertaining. Typically they've had like the most American players in them. So those are the ones I watch along with the MLS.
Okay. I didn't know. I guess I did know that about you and the Fire. Have the Fire won a championship in the MLS or no?
Yeah. So they were really good for the first 10 years. They actually won the MLS Cup in their first year. And they were really good for 10 years. They had so they started in 1998. They had multiple like U.S. men's national team legends that coached for them. One of the U.S. men's national team's coaches was their coach. It was really interesting when they started, in order to really try and appeal to folks here in Chicago and build the fan base quickly. They had a bunch of guys from the Polish national team that were on the team. And I'm Polish. My grandparents on my dad's side are from Poland. So I've got a ton of like very Polish relatives, and they were really excited when the Fire, were signing all these guys. So we were going to games when I was younger. I still have like a replica 1998, like Fire championship ring. And I actually worked at their stadium in high school. And that was my first job. I was a guest services representative, which like couldn't have picked a better summer job. Got to watch all the games. Their stadium was like 5 minutes away from my house because they moved to a stadium in the suburbs for a few years. Worked there in college, and it was just the best, being able to go to so many. And that was probably like the height of their popularity in Chicago. They've been awful since then, like literally like one of the worst teams in MLS. They ran into some bad ownership, but it's really exciting. They got a Joe Mansueto, who owns Morningstar and is a billionaire, bought the team and is really starting to reinvest in them. They're coming back to Soldier Field, and I think there's going to definitely be a bit more of a buzz around them this summer that I'm really excited to go back to a game for. So, yeah, the Fire. If I had to, pick a club team, they're definitely it.
Yeah, I went to a game at I don't know which stadium it was, but it was a Fire game in 2009 or 2008 summer.
Park. Yeah.
And they were really good at that point. The group I went with, there was a specific chant. We were behind the goal, right? And it was like "Vamos la Máquina Roja."
Yep.
It was like a big, and it was fun. But I was kind of like not in that world. So I was kind of like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yeah.
I had just started like, underage drinking at that point. So
Section 8 got wild. They kind of, again, with the team being so bad, Section 8's kind of dissipated a little bit. But yeah, MLS, I know it's not the best league in the world, but it's our league and it's getting better. And it's really exciting to see how many new markets they're adding and like the attendance at some, like Charlotte's first game, Charlotte has a new team. They sold out the Panthers football stadium for their home opener. It's really cool to see how soccer is growing, and so many of the teams have their own stadiums that are like sick and have like these amazing atmospheres. So it's just been really neat to see how soccer has grown over the past, basically since I was in high school, I would say, and even before that. But yeah, can't wait to have the World Cup here in 2026 too.
Me too, man. I've definitely become more of a fan. I've always been a basketball, football guy, but recently baseball and soccer have been really, really fun to watch and just be part of those communities. I met a guy at a concert last weekend. He was wearing a club team from Europe, and I was like, "What is that?" He told me, and then I was like, "Who do you think is going to win the World Cup?" He's like, "Honestly, I think France or Brazil might have some of the best teams." I don't follow it to know who the favorites might be, or I don't know if you do, but do you have any thoughts on, besides the Americans rooting out of passion, right?
Yeah.
Who's a favorite this year?
Yeah, I know those are the top two teams with the odds makers. If I had to pick one, I'd probably go France. The World Cup's kind of weird in that, like, I shouldn't say it's weird, but there's never been an upset winner. It's kind of like basketball where like the most talented team is typically going to go really far. Croatia was a huge deal that they got to, the last World Cup final, but then again, they had two of the best midfielders in the world on their team. So, they more just had like a gold generation of players, but I think France definitely would probably be the one team I would pick. I think if we're just talking about a team that might be able to like replicate what Croatia did and go really deep, I think Denmark is a team that super talented. They showed up, and played really well at the Euros last year. And that was despite, their best player literally having like a heart attack on the field. And they were able to recover from that and play really well in that tournament. And he's actually he's back and is playing for them. He's a really talented attacking player, and he's back in form, scoring goals for them. So I think they could be a really dangerous team come the World Cup. So kind of outside of the traditional powers, it's like very much Spain, France, Germany, Brazil. I think Denmark would be a team to watch out for.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. I remember like just playing FIFA growing up. Brazil had Ronaldinho for a couple of years, and they were I remember they were just faster than every team on that game. And then around a couple of years later, my favorite was Schweinsteiger.
Yeah, he played for the Fire for a few years too, man. It was what a great name. Just so good. He still lives here in Chicago too, actually.
No way. So you're Polish, I'm German, so I like Schweinsteiger.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. My last name is actually it means fall in German, like autumn. But it comes from the Polish side of my family. Obviously, the borders over the centuries in that part of the world have changed quite a bit. But yeah, I'm part German as well. But definitely, they're just one of my favorite teams to watch, and I really root for the Germans. They play such an entertaining brand of soccer. The German league is what's great about the German league is they let their young players really play. So you've got some of the best teenage, attacking players in the world typically go to Germany to start their careers. So super fun league to watch. And I always love their commitment to developing the young guys.
For sure. In closing here, I normally ask every person kind of like a wild card question. Who do you think is the best soccer player of all time?
Oh, it's Messi. It's not even it's not Ronaldo. Messi is by far I think Ronaldo's probably the best goal scorer of all time, but Messi, I think from a total skills perspective is just it's almost freakish what he could do with the ball. So I'd go with him.
Most people ask that question too. They say Messi, not even close. Even the stats say it. I like Ronaldo. I'm a big fan of some of his goals, and I lived in Spain for 6 months. Messi was on FC Barcelona at that point, and Ronaldo was on Real Madrid. But I just think that Messi, what I've heard and what I've seen, like just YouTube videos, he makes something out of nothing. He's so quick with his feet, right? Like he can just score on 2 defenders, and he's a magician.
They call him like micro touches. I don't understand how he is able to dribble through traffic as well as he does. And especially like Spain, while he was there, it's not some chump league. It was the best league in the world, until the Premier League overtook it. But no, Ronaldo is, I think he's one of the most electric players of all time. I think he's probably one of the best, if not the best, like pure goal scorer of all time. But I think just when you're looking at the total package, I have to go Messi. He's 5'7", he weighs like 150 pounds, and he's just making people look foolish out there. It's just unbelievable what he's been able to do in his career.
Yeah. How do you not root for a guy like that, right?
And he's a very humble dude. Which credit to him, given, the heights that he's soared to. I think he's married to like his high school sweetheart. Mm-hmm. So easy to root for a guy as well.
For sure. All right, man. Really appreciate getting into PR and just that whole world, right? How you're looking at news and gathering information. I didn't know some of that stuff about the sports you threw down on me just now. So always good. Again, always learning. And I appreciate that about you. And thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, no, thanks for the invite, Nick. I think this is awesome that you're doing this. I really appreciate, your interest in other people. I think you're just I love your commitment to curiosity. It's something that I think a lot of people can learn from. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you, man. Yeah, if everyone in my life can get on and be that niche expert in their field, that's what I want to hear about. So that's what it comes down to, is curiosity.
You bet.
All right, man. Have a good night. Bye.
Yeah, you too.